So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Landor Link's National Blue Badge Protecting the Blue Badge Scheme webinar this morning. As you can see, my name is Gavin Manger, and I'm the Strategic Partnership Manager for Landor Links. Just a few bits of housekeeping. We have three speakers this morning who would love to take questions at the end. If you could please drop your questions into the Q&A box, chat box at the bottom. I will then put them to the panel after the last person has spoken. That will be Richard this morning. If you put comments in the chat, I can obviously see them, but would prefer them all to be in the Q&A box at the same time. So that's appreciated. We're aiming to run for about an hour and a half, but if there are questions that keep coming in, I'm very happy to keep going. And I've spoken to Marcus, Tom and Richard as well, and they have time to do so as well. So just very quickly before we start, next slide, a quick plug for the Decarbonisation Transport Awards 2026. We had confirmation yesterday that Robert Llewellyn will be hosting, which is great news. I've sort of followed him when he was Scrap Heap Challenge and Red Dwarf, and a very entertaining and interesting man. So please do get your entries in. I think December the 5th, there's a big December the 5th sign on the slide, is the final date. We've had a lot so far, and I'm looking forward to reading them and perhaps understanding a bit more about decarbonisation. So yeah, shameless plug, apologies about that, and we'll now crack on with the webinar. Disabled Blue Badge fraud has been something that's been floating around for many, many years. Misuse and fraud. I remember when I first started working in Ealing, Tom, no disrespect to you, but you could go down to a local pub in Southall and they would have them on a shelf behind the bar and you could buy them for, I think it was about 50 to 75 pounds in those days. I'm sure the price has gone up. But also now you can print them off. You can, the printers have become better, copies have become better. There are people misusing them all over the country. So we've got a very interesting discussion this morning. We're going to start with Tom, who's interim head of parking at Ealing and also a representative of Disabled Motoring UK. We're then going to move on to Marcus, who is from Nottingham City Council. I've been following Marcus on LinkedIn for the last couple of weeks, and he's out in the front line, busting people on the street. So hopefully we'll hear about that. And then we're going to move on to Richard at the end from the National Blue Badge to perhaps give us some perspective on what can be done about this. So I'm going to hand over to Tom. And as I said, please put questions in the Q&A box and we will reconvene at the end. Tom, if you would like to start sharing your screen and keep going.
Thank you. So I'll just, if you just let me know if you can just see my screen, everything's all ready.
Yeah, all good, Tom.
Fantastic. Morning, everyone. Really delighted and grateful to, be invited here today to talk to you, and really glad that there's an actual, event which is talking about the Blue Badge scheme. A little bit about me. I'm the interim head of parking for the London Borough of Ealing. I'm also a trustee for DM UK. Got just over 15 years worth of experience within enforcement. And I am the founder. I founded the National Blue Badge Day of Action, which probably a lot of you have participated in previously. What I wanted to talk about initially was to, start at the beginning and actually talk about what is the Blue Badge scheme. We all understand it and we know it to an extent, but, actually sort of breaking it down into its very basics. So the very basic definition of it from the Department of Transport is that it's a scheme that provides a national range of on-street parking concessions to Blue Badge holders. But for me, it's something different. For me, it's actually a national mobility rights scheme. It's about giving people the right to use their own mobility and have access to society like everyone else does. It's a scheme which is, the heart of it is based on equality, independence, and access. It's a scheme that, quite importantly, only specifically applies to on-street parking concessions. Now, the core rights of the Blue Badge scheme are actually provided in legislation under the Local Authorities Traffic Orders Regulations 2000, and it'll probably be a surprise to people as to what exactly the core rights of holders are. Now, a local authority has to provide parking free of charge and without time limit for on-street pay and display or meters, designated on-street disabled bays unless there's imposed time limits, parking on single or yellow double lines for up to 3 hours unless there is a no loading ban, and the badge and the time clock are displayed correctly. Now, these are the actual minimum standards that the Department of Transport impose upon local authorities. And there's often a perception that it's, park anywhere, anytime, and that really isn't the case. And the core right as well is that the scheme applies to drivers and passengers, which is something I'll mention later. Now, the things to understand from a local authority perspective is what actually isn't automatically covered. Off-street car parks, private operators, even some council car parks do set their own rules. They may allow some free or extended parking, but it is actually discretionary. Permit-only bays, this is a really big area within parking where there is no national entitlement. Councils are at liberty to decide at their own discretion if they want blue badge holders to use these bays. Some boroughs do allow it, others prohibit it. Where you've got bays which are resident permit holder bays, whether they're business permit bays, whether they're bays linked to specific shopping hours, all of these will have their own traffic management orders designed by local authorities, and it's up to them to decide whether they permit blue badge holders to use them or not. Control parking zones, another example of local authorities will make their own decisions as to whether blue badges are exempt from the restrictions within these areas. And obviously private land. The key thing here is that within private land, the Equalities Act means that there must be provisions for disabled motorists, but there doesn't have to be concessions, which is something different. And as I said, the idea is often the perception is it's an anywhere, anytime parking type scheme, when in reality it isn't. Now, what I wanted to do is I've spoken a lot about the Blue Badge scheme, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And one thing I think it's really important for everyone to know is about how we actually got here, where the scheme has actually developed from. Now, disabled people after the war, were treated more as welfare cases and not rights holders. The rights of disabled people has evolved a lot, and as society's values have changed, so has the rights of disabled people. Disabled people typically have very limited access to workspace, shops, or public life. There wasn't a lot designed within society and in the environment to actually support people. The very early access devices that were created were some of the very early invalid carriages, and these were primarily focused on actual disabled drivers. If you remember, I said earlier, it's about the driver and the passenger. The initial focus on supporting disabled people was purely on people who were disabled and who also could drive vehicles. Now, the early invalid carriages you'll have probably seen here were the very first design at trying to support people who were disabled. Now, there's been a lot of change since then, particularly a lot of the rise in a lot of the movement groups, particularly the disabled group, the Royal Association of Disability and Rehabilitation. And a key champion for the Blue Badge scheme was an MP called Alf Morris. He really was the first major campaigner in Parliament to actually push for national enforceable rights for people. It was at that point that there was a recognition that exclusion was environmental and not medical. And what I mean by that is the reason disabled people were being excluded in society was not because of their disability, but because the way society was designed, the way the highways, the streets, parking provisions, everything was designed for able-bodied people, and it wasn't designed to support disabled people. Now, in the 1970s, there was landmark legislation which brought about the first disabled rights in law for people. It required councils in law to reduce barriers, and it introduced the very first orange badge scheme, which is the precursor to the blue badge scheme. This is one of the examples of the very first orange badges that were used. There were a few different variants, but this is typically what they looked like. And as you can see, very rudimentary and basic, with details handwritten on the front. And as you can imagine, very susceptible to fraud. Mobility was very much framed as a right, and it was a real pivotal moment in actually shaping how our society supports people who are disabled. Between 1971 and 2000, there was very much a growth and consolidation, with the Orange Badge scheme being rolled out across the country. Standardised rules for councils were put in place, and the first dedicated disabled bays were actually introduced. There was a real shift from it being seen as a local agreement or a local favour for disabled people to actually a national entitlement, what people were actually should be receiving. Now, in the 2000s to 2019, was a massive modernisation, and the blue badge we know now replaced the orange badge scheme. Enforcement was hugely strengthened by legislation that brought in play power for on-street civil enforcement officers, which gave them formal powers to actually seize, withdraw or cancel badges, a power that hadn't existed previously. And there was also the launch of the digital records and essential verification process. Now, in 2019, there was a huge change in the criteria, where severe psychological distress, autism, a range of different cognitive disorders were added to the eligibility criteria, and really rightly so. It was a huge step forward for us as a society to understand how real world mobility barriers are not just physical impairments, but can be mental impairment or psychological impairment as well. Now, where we are now as a bit of a snapshot is there are 2.8 million badge holders approximately in the country. However, there are 10 million people believed to be eligible for blue badge. Theft and fraud and misuse are significant problems. There's inconsistent enforcement across the country, and the expectations of the public now are higher than ever. Disabled Motion UK do an annual survey called Baywatch. 86% of the disabled motorists replied, said they'd witnessed blue badge misuse. 87% had never had their blue badge ever checked, and 62% said they found parking concessions confusing. It's difficult to understand when they can or can't park with their blue badge. Now, the challenges we see moving forward are very much inconsistent and uneven enforcement between councils. There's a huge grey area within private land and the rights of blue badge holders there. There's increasing numbers of stolen badges, and there's real confusion about rights. This just gives you an example of sometimes, the hugely complicated signs people are often, presented with when you enter into a parking facility as to what they can or can't do. And the number of hidden disability cases is rising significantly. Now, local government has got three specific key responsibilities. They have to administer a scheme, enforce a scheme, and promote accessibility. And from my experience, the administering and the promoting accessibility, are generally done quite well, but the enforcing scheme is really poor. Now, the local authorities are given clear guidance by the DFT as to exactly how they are to administer the scheme, and it always surprises me. Well, it shouldn't really, but it does amaze me how so many local authorities aren't enforcing the scheme at all in some cases, when this particular guidance itself mentions enforcement 60 times. It talks about, and these are just a few of the examples, it talks about how the responsibility for day-to-day administration and enforcement of the scheme. It talks about a requirement to actually publicise investigations and publicise the enforcement initiatives that are being done to reduce blue badge misuse. It talks about recording serial numbers and sharing data with other councils around parking enforcement and blue badge misuse. It talks about how local authorities have the freedom to develop enforcement strategies. So there's a range of different enforcement options. And Richard later is going to talk about some fantastic work National Blue Badge are doing, but there's a range of different ways that authorities are encouraged to explore as to how they investigate blue badges. It's not a prescriptive one-stop shop or single process. You are encouraged to be creative and to think about the best way your authority can investigate and deal with blue badge misuse, and that will depend on your size, financial remit, challenges you have. And obviously there's specific things where it just tells you must enforce the blue badge scheme. Now, for me, I see the opportunities are digitalisation, the digital blue badge options, which are soon going to become available. There's partnership with private landowners. There's more transparency on enforcement stats. The Department for Transport stopped publishing council data on how many prosecutions there were in 2020. When I've asked the DFT why this is, the reason is basically not enough councils were responding, and the data they had was so limited it wasn't worthwhile. That's a really sad reflection on local authorities on, what they're not doing. We need stronger public education, and we need to think about more disposal methods. There's a range of different and really, excellent ways of dealing with blue badge offences, not just prosecution, but around awareness courses, which are really cutting edge ways to deal with offences. The blue badge scheme for me has been hard fought, and it's absolutely essential that we do everything we can now to protect it and to modernise it. That's my section finished. If there are any questions, I don't mind taking them now, or maybe it might be better to do it at the end.
Thank you very much, Tom. If you could stop sharing your screen, I can see too many of me. Thank you. Thank you. Interesting. I had no idea that the rules were different in each local authority. I assumed it was a sort of UK-based scheme. So that's really interesting. Perhaps something we can pick up on. We will do the Q&As at the end, I think, as discussed earlier. I'm also sort of very interested in the sort of hidden disabilities. I see online people being accused of not using their disabled badges correctly, and perhaps again that's something we can pick up on. So we're now going to move on to Marcus. Hopefully you're ready, willing, and able, Marcus. If you could start sharing your screen. As I said, I've been following some of your stuff on LinkedIn, and you seem to be right out there in the front line, tackling disabled fraud and misuse. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Thanks, Gavin. Just going to share the screen now. Hopefully, should be council technology at its greatest. Can everyone see that? Hopefully, Gavin will say with severe mobility issues and mental health, allowing them to park closer. So misuse does undermine the purpose, creates unfairness, congestion, and hostility in some cases. So in Nottingham, we've seen misuse rise alongside the demand. So we've got over about 4,000 badge holders, and I know there's over 2 million nationally. And obviously the monetary value in city centres predominantly makes it a target for fraud. So if we could just look at the next one. Next slide. So in the city, this is something that other local authorities could do as well, with basic use of technology and software that we all use. So we receive public information, but the vast majority of our information comes from our civil enforcement officers, who conduct daily on-street checks, observations, badge inspections, along with myself and other authorised officers. So we have strict reporting mechanisms in place with our policies and procedures. We create our casework using our own bespoke database. We carry out all data requests ourselves. We gather our own statements. We gather CCTV footage. We use the DFT's manage system and our own CMS. We obviously use DVLA for vehicle keeper checks. We actually use NAFIN, the National Anti-Fraud. We interview, we'd carry out formal PACE interviews. We do a lot now by post, and we seem to get a lot more interaction when we do by post or online. And our legal teams are quite chuffed with the way that we do that. And we actually get more of a response by doing it by post instead of in person. And once we've obviously investigated majority of the cases, we'll pass it over to legal for their review. We also issue cautions, and we do warnings. We are looking at the potential working with MBD to do our online course, like a speed awareness course. So in 2024, we recorded around 600 misuse cases, which included the vast majority were expired badges, and over nearly 200 cancelled badges. Moving on to the next slide. So we collect, as I've alluded to before, our evidence gathering. We collect all the badges that are seized, the photographs, any body worn footage. We use the DVLA and NAFIN to verify the ownership. Our challenges are quite few and far between, but it's difficult when the badge holder is absent and the driver obviously claims legitimate use, and there is a rise on refusals to allow an inspection of the badge, and it also differentiating misuse by relatives from fraud needs careful documentation and scrutiny. So moving on to what works well in Nottingham. Next slide. So what works well in the city, and again, this is something that can be done with other local authorities. Tom said it all depends on local things that are in place, but vast majority of us have CEOs, which can be authorised officers, or even just an odd bod like me who just wanders around doing it. But we carry out daily badge checks, and we have scheduled enforcement days, including the National Blue Badge Day of Action, which is great to put it out there to the general public. So we ensure that there's always a constant briefings to CEOs to ensure that they're checking. We have an in-house training and mentoring program, which I undertake. On that note, I'm the only officer within the authority that carries out the badge enforcement side of things. I work with a part-time officer with me. So this is all done just with 1.5 posts. We work in partnership with car parking operators, including our 2 large NHS hospitals. And we work closely with the police, and we're able to gather more enforcement issues. Challenges that we face. Oh, someone pressing the button. There we go. So we have had some significant results from it. And again, all this does come from basic checks that local authorities can do. Sorry, moving on to the next slide. So practical challenges we have. I'll put a photo of me there because I can be quite of a challenge. So we can have resource limitations, or depends on what officers have got in, what availability I'm on, changing shift patterns. But we always ensure that there's someone available to carry out basic blue badge checks in the city. We have some legal thresholds. So some authorities may have legal high standards, substantial evidence, but we found that after a certain amount of time, you can give a basic prosecution pack to get a good outcome. There is the occasional hostility during enforcement, so officers do encounter some hostility, but it is quite rare. However, with the decent training and guidance, it can be dealt with and can be used as evidence where necessary. So technology and information, so changes made to the digital information that's available can have a negative consequence for enforcement. There is an ongoing battle with digital use at the minute and downtime, but we have backups where necessary. So it's all about working with what we've got. So again, as Tom also alluded to, there are differences in local authority and procedures and policies, and we find that sometimes it is a bit of a challenge to speak with other local authorities and get information that we need. Next slide. So future ideas from us, or from my perspective, we're looking for a specialised team with specialised CEOs. We're looking obviously at the digital badge implementation quite closely, but there is a question there about the efficient enforcement should that digital badge be introduced. Obviously, cutting out the fakes, forgeries, and all that jazz. Would there be changes to how enforcement is done? Public awareness campaigns we know always work, and in the city we do try and use social media and the local press to push that out. Enforcement always seems to be at the bottom of importance. And we also data analytics. So that's a posh way of just putting that we use data as much as we can to help us put us in the right place of where we need to be. So based on civil enforcement officer information and the general public. And the final slide is just to a final message, really, and a call out to other local authorities, as in don't be afraid to start doing the basics. Use your CEOs, use what you've got in place. We need to protect the scheme to ensure it's fair use. Obviously, we all need a proactive approach. And again, that wider adoption does help. So a few stats there. We have an issue, obviously, with cancelled badges, particularly stolen badges, and simple checks that local authorities can do will find those cancelled badges. The vast majority of our stolen and fraudulent badges originate from London. So again, that refers to the digital badge and whether that'll have a change in that. But the most common misuse and abuse is obviously by friends and family, and that's again can be simply dealt with. So as I say, the questions are at the end. I will try and help with any questions should we need to, but hopefully that's filled you in on a little bit of what we do.
Great, thank you very much, Marcus. Yeah, what's becoming sort of quite clear is consistency across the board is seems to be an issue.
Yeah.
My mother has a disabled badge, and I have to admit I've never used it, but I have definitely been tempted on occasions. But I think we'll probably come to that in the Q&As at the end. So thank you very much. Can I just ask that the speakers that aren't currently speaking, myself and Deval included, if we can just keep our microphones muted. Apparently there's some feedback, so I apologise for that. We'll try and get that sorted. So we're now going to move on to Richard. Richard's been involved in parking for many years now. I'm sure he will explain some of his background. With Richard, if you'd like to turn your mic and camera on and share screen as we practiced. Hopefully that will work.
Great. Camera on.
Camera on, that's it. We're halfway there.
Sharing the screen.
Full screen.
Perfect.
Working? Right, I'm
Wonderful.
going to leave you to it then.
Thanks very much, Gavin, and good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Richard Boultbee. As Gavin said, I have been in parking for a long time. I'm not going to say how long, but I started at local authority, and I was there for a good 10 years. Started as a civil engineer, still an engineer at heart, really. I then moved on to private industry and spent most of my career supplying technology to the parking world. That was either in the form of pay and display machines for a lot of it. I started a company known as IPS Group UK. I did that, which was great fun. And then I moved into the private parking world to see how that works, and that was interesting as well. But since then, I've moved on to National Blue Badge. Primarily, and what excited me was, as both the speakers previously have mentioned, there's something that needs to be fixed here. And going back to my engineer roots, I like to fix things. So, and it's a heck of a challenge. So what I'm going to talk about today are 3 tools which we are working on at National Blue Badge to help local authorities primarily to be able to fix this problem. One of the tools that we are developing is the digitisation of the blue badge. That's not quite ready yet, although technically it could go live. And I'm very excited to have it on my iPhone. I'm also going to talk about, firstly, about our awareness course service. Something that Tom mentioned is a service which we feel fits very well into the tools for a local authority to be able to enforce and control blue badge misuse. And then the last piece I'm going to talk about, something which we haven't, we've started to scope, but primarily came out of conversations I had in Scotland and in Wales, where the current application process is guidance. And what I've found, and I haven't spoken to too many authorities in England, but what seems to be the case is that with the guidance that the DFT provides, you can use the base guidance, and that's fine. But some authorities have other criteria that they want to apply to the application process before they issue a blue badge, and that part isn't digitised. So, for example, in Scotland, they have a risk in traffic criteria. That isn't within the current application process, so they have to carry out a separate process. In other words, send a form out to an applicant to fill in the application process to complete their criteria. And the criteria can differ from authority to authority, which was, again, news to me. So we feel that we can have a look at that and perhaps improve that and make it fully digital for local authorities going forward. We'll see where we go with that particular piece. That's scoped at the moment. So I've got one which is ready now, and I've got one which is just about ready, and one for our future. So why do we need an awareness course? Well, I'm not going to go over it too much because I think really the problems with the blue badge scheme have been well mentioned by the two previous speakers. So what is the awareness course? Well, the way we see it is it's a tool which can fit in to the options that the local for the authority to look at prior to going to prosecution. Why don't we just send everybody to prosecution? And sorry for the local authorities on board, I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs a little bit. Primarily, it's expensive to go through prosecution, and there are a lot of people and a lot of misuse out there that could go through to prosecution, which would be quite resource intensive and bring a high cost to the authority. I can't quote all numbers, but numbers that have been passed to me in the past months have been, it can range between £3,000 and £6,000 per prosecution to go to court. And it takes court time and it takes quite a lot of resource to get to that stage. There is a precedent out there for an awareness course, and very well documented precedent it is in a speed awareness course for those that have broken the speed limit with the police. And again, the police, using their discretionary powers, can offer you an awareness course. And I have to say I've been on one of those. And perhaps I'm the only one on this call that has, but what it is it reminds you that you have broken the law and that you will be subject to prosecution, but you can take up the option of an awareness course. So we thought it fits really well with this particular case. So we offer a awareness course. We've created an awareness course, which is a series of hard-hitting videos and questions and answers, a bit like if those that have been on it a speed awareness course. But the people that would then pay for the course aren't the authority. It's actually the person that is caught misusing the badge. So there's no cost to the authority for that. And the cost for it is put onto that user. And they can choose to take up that offer made by the local authority, or perhaps they could choose to go to prosecution and go down that what is the common route. Why do we want to do this? For me, it brings back integrity to the blue badge scheme. At the moment, if you are a person that breaks the rules and misuses your badge and you get caught, these are all things that need to happen. You need to be caught, and that can be quite rare. Some authorities, as mentioned by Marcus, some do it more than others. So you have to be caught to start with, and then you have to perhaps be issued with a PCM for a parking offence. Then the authority has to choose to perhaps pursue it further and then go through to prosecution. What we do with the awareness course is give the authority a tool to allow everybody, or then allow them to put everybody who breaks the rules or misuses their badge to go on an awareness course. That should hopefully, with the public, then realise that if they do misuse the badge, there is going to be a result from misusing that badge, rather than perhaps a lottery of you may go to court or you may not, depending on if the authority has the resources to do so. So we feel it brings some integrity back. It's a tool which can come in and actually provide a result for every incident if the authority choose to do that. It's important to say that because the authority does have discretionary powers. Tom mentioned it earlier. Before you choose, and it feels a little bit like how it's been for the past lots of years, the only route is prosecution. Before you choose to go to prosecution, the authority can actually choose to go another route, as Tom mentioned. And as put out in the DFT guidance, the DFT is encouraging authorities to find other ways to go through the enforcement. So an awareness course, yeah, it is a little bit like a speed awareness course, as Marcus mentioned. It's a precedent out there that works, and it does in effect the same thing. You will be reminded with a series of hard-hitting videos about the effect of misusing the badge has on genuine badge holders and people that genuinely need that blue badge space. The effect on their mobility, their ability to get to where they want to be, because perhaps a space has been taken by someone that shouldn't really be using the badge. It's also a reminder, it's an educational piece. You know, more than anything else, watching these videos in this course really reminds you of why it's there and its purpose. And it's an educational piece, so hopefully people don't do it again. Because I know from my limited experience in this, speaking to people about it, that there genuinely are badge holders that believe they can give it to their family to perhaps fetch their medication or to fetch their shopping. And they can't really. It's not for that person. It's primarily, as Tom mentioned as well, it's about letting people disabled people get closer to where they need to be. An able-bodied son or daughter going to fetch the shopping because they can park closer to Sainsbury's isn't really what it's for. They can walk the same as everybody else. But there is a piece out there, an education piece that people need to be reminded of that it isn't for that purpose. It is for the badge holder themselves to be able to get about. And the awareness course does that. It is something which you can't skip through. There are questions and answers on the course. So you will watch videos and you'll be primed to answer questions about what you've seen. And each question has a response. You may get the question wrong, and you'll be told that you've got the question wrong and why. If you get the question right, you will also be told why it's right, and each step of the way. Authorities can choose how it's put across to the user. Because what we are doing here at National Blue Badge is we are providing it on behalf of the authority. So local authorities we are speaking to right now, some have a view on how perhaps hard-hitting the course should be, and some would like a softer approach. And the script and the way it's delivered is signed off by every local authority. Each communication back to the person is also signed off by the local authority. So National Blue Badge do not really get involved with the language as such that goes to that person that's misused the badge. We provide templates and starting points for local authorities to then tailor it to their own needs. So as mentioned there on the screen, important to know that local authorities is a no-cost element. When you're looking at your discretionary powers, is it in the public interest? Yes. Better use of council resources. It isn't costing the local authority money. And you are looking at different ways to be able to enforce other than to go to prosecution, which takes up more court time and it removes that element. And that's not to say every misuse of a badge should go on a course. There are some serious misuses of badges which the authority can choose to go another route, perhaps through prosecution. And that is at their discretion, because this isn't a silver bullet for everything, but we believe the vast majority, if you can say the middle type cases where they perhaps need more than a warning letter, but you shouldn't really, or think that they may not need to go to court, this fits with those kind of misuses. And again, it's a tool for the local authority. Putting this into place then really for us helps close a gap between making that decision to say, can we afford to take people to court? Perhaps not, but we can offer them a course and get a result for every misuse. So that's the awareness course. I'm going to move on to another exciting bit for me. I like technology. I'm going to move on to digitisation of the blue badge. Another piece of work that we're doing right now, and as Marcus mentioned, and I think Tom, digitisation of the badge is long overdue, in my opinion. You might say I will say that because we're looking at developing the digital version of it. We have got a digital version of the badge on a smartphone right now, and it's being tested and being tweaked, so that it can become a digital version of the blue badge. In its first instance, it may just become a verification tool to prove that you are at the location where the badge is being used. But we are lining up conversations with the Department for Transport, with the British Parking Association, to discuss how this can be rolled out. We're also in deep conversation as well with the National Parking Platform about how it can be integrated into their system. I'll talk more about that in a second. Why? Again, a little bit sucking eggs here, but the existing badge, we feel, is outdated. It is a laminated piece of card with a hologram on it. I know for the local authorities and even the private operators involved, looking through perhaps a steamed up windscreen on a winter's day to try and work out if it's a legitimate badge is a difficult thing to do, and some will be better at it than others. There have been conversations about sticking a chip on the card, but that can still mean that the card can be passed around. It's easily reproduced and stolen and sold. Sadly, yes, windscreens are being smashed for badges, and they're being sold, as Gavin kind of mentioned, in pubs and clubs around the UK. So we need to try and stop that. And the final bit, as Marcus mentioned, it can be used by other people than who it's prescribed, and we need to try and reduce that down to reduce the misuse of the badge. So how will it work? Well, everyone that's got a smartphone will know that you have biometric checks on a phone, and that's a key part of what we see as being the digital badge for the future. If you can do a biometric check in the location that you are in before you start your parking, and that biometric check is linked to the badge holder, then we know the badge holder is in that location, and then you can start your parking, or close to that location, for reasons of badge holders being picked up perhaps from supermarkets, which is perfectly allowed under the scheme. But key to it is biometrically checking that they're in place. That could be a face check, it could be a thumb check. For those that have got smartphones, I'm sure you're perhaps familiar with that process right now. And then badge holders are then linked to their existing badge in that location. But we want to make it really popular. We want to make the badge wanted by badge holders, and not just as an enforcement tool. So what else do we put on there? Well, we want to put payment on there. So where payment is required, you will be verified as a badge holder, but you will also be able to make payment on the same app. That could be the same price as everybody else, but it introduces the ability for local authorities to perhaps introduce a different charge for badge holders if they want to. They don't have to worry about accessibility because they don't need to get to a machine as such. They'll be able to pay there and then inside one app. We also want to have finding parking. So finding blue badge parking will be important. It can help people choose which journey they're going to take, and navigating to find parking will be important. In the first instance, we're talking to the authorities all the time, but we will only be choosing to navigate vehicles to off-street parking. I think Tom alluded to it really, badge holders can park in lots of places. They can park on WL lines, which by their nature are places we don't want people to park. So we're not going to be navigating people to WL lines in the first instance. We believe navigating people to car parks will be a real useful tool. And the first incarnation of that will be by National Parking Platform. So we can pull down location data, direct people to it, tell people what the price will be before they get there. Another element will be a QR code, which will be linked to prove to the people that scan the code that you are a verified blue badge holder. In the parking world, that could mean access to a barriered car park. In a retail world, that could be a discount, or it could be an access to a football stadium, if you want to be able to read that QR code and prove that person is a blue badge holder. So there is development on that away from parking as well. Just gone over all that, so I've just skipped through my own slide, but basically that's how we would do it. The badge is uploaded onto the digital badge. We verify that with the DFT, that is a legitimate blue badge holder. They take a photo of themselves with their badge, and they also send a photo of their badge to get their digital blue badge, and then they can go on to use it from there. Onto the application process. Conscious of time a little bit. As I mentioned right at the start, we're scoping this right now. We believe the current application process can be improved. Speaking to authorities as I have for the past months, it seems that there is really only one main provider of this application process. Used to be called Northgate. I think it's now NEC. We think they need some competition. And we also think we can make it better and more flexible. So if there are authorities with the new criteria that's out there, as Tom mentioned right at the start, want to introduce criteria digitally into their application process, we're going to be able to make that suit that authority's criteria. And if the next authority want to reduce the criteria, they'll be able to reduce that down. So the questions and answers which can be answered digitally suit the criteria and policy of that local authority. The final bit there, right at the end, we also see some synchronization with the digital blue badge. Over a quarter of applications that are processed, this was by Perth and Kinross Council, thank you for the data, over a quarter of applications are for a renewal, perhaps for a permanent disability. But that does take quite a lot of time to process, and maybe that can fit on your digital blue badge on your smartphone when the time is right. So we're going to be looking at that for the future, and we'll see where that goes as well. So that's it from me. Just to let everybody know, in terms of National Blue Badge, we have the accreditations that you can see on there. We have Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. We support disabled motoring UK. But as you can possibly imagine, with all the data that we're working with, it's crucial that we handle data correctly. And we have made sure that foundation is in place before we started on this track. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Richard. We, as expected, we have loads of questions coming in. So if I can just ask Tom, Richard, and Marcus to pay attention. If when you're not answering, if you could just have your microphones on mute, it just saves the feedback. That would be helpful. But I think I will jump straight into some of them. You're going to see me peering at the screen a lot now because my eyesight is not as good as it used to be. So one's coming from Sarah, and I probably think Marcus and Tom, this might be you initially. How much does it cost the council on average to undertake a prosecution? Clearly, it's time consuming, hence maybe the low number of prosecutions. And I think kind of added to that, Kieran Clark, good to see you awake this time of the morning, Kieran. He wants to know how much of the money actually comes back to the local authority. Marcus, perhaps you could start with that one.
Yeah, it's a good question. To be fair, I've not really worked out how much it would cost us to send. I only find out sort of how much we get at the end of it. We do recover the costs. Legal put their costs and they recover the costs, but that is different for each case. There are scales the magistrate works to, and that sort of outlines the costs and the actual fine that they're allowed to give. So I couldn't give a definitive answer on the local authority cost, how much it cost me to do it, something I can work out. But we do recover the costs of the work that we put in.
Thank you. Tom, do you any stats, figures? Do you know what it is in Ealing? I think you're still on mute, Tom.
Sorry. It depends on the severity of the offence, but typically, you're looking any blue badge prosecution is going to be costing you a minimum of sort of £1,500 to £2,000, and that's even for a very basic offence. Some of your more serious, fraud offences or something which is done over time, is possibly going to cost you even more as well. You've got to take into account the cost of the CEO's time dealing with it, the time of it being investigated, the time of it being passed to a prosecutor, the time of then actually paying for someone to attend court if there's a trial. Most councils will employ their own barristers. Because the prosecutors aren't legally trained to do trials, so it can be hugely expensive, and very often costs are awarded based on someone's needs and how much they can afford to pay. So very often, you'll get £20 back a month for the next 5 years. So money will come back, but it's very much at a trickle. One of the keys to getting the money back, though, is victim impact statements, and that's where a lot of councils go wrong. So if you send a case to court, it's really important at the end that you detail in your victim impact statement how this has affected not only disabled people in your community, but also the council financially, because then when magistrates have got a full grip of that, they're in a better place to award costs to authorities.
So it's a very interesting point, Tom, and a couple of questions, link questions that have come in. It says currently the max fine for blue badge misuse is £1,000. I don't know if that's correct. I'm sure it is. And the sort of subsequent questions that's come in, I think probably from a different person, is that sufficient? Is that enough of a deterrent to put people off? And if not, what should it be? And I think your point of the £20 over the next 50 years is a good one. That happens a lot throughout our industry. I mean, is that enough to put people off? Would that stop me using my mum's disabled badge?
For me personally, I would probably say, no. I don't think it's enough. It should be up to 5,000 in my view. But one of the biggest challenges we face within blue badge enforcement is that so many of these changes require legislation change, and we are bound by what legislation states at the moment. So one thing I would encourage people from local authority or private sector to do here is to contact the DFT, contact your local MP, make this an issue where we can improve the powers available to councils to deal with these with these offences, because certainly that isn't a sufficient enough fine.
If I could just add on that as well, sometimes it also depends on as you stated, the actual misuse itself and what the situation was. If you prosecute somebody under the Fraud Act, you're looking at possible increased fines. But a lot of the time, a lot of the authorities do prosecute under the Road Traffic Act, and I know our legal team preferred to do that because of the ease of it. We have tried to push a lot more now under the Fraud Act, which does increase the fines a little bit. But as Tom said, it's down to how much that person can afford at the end of it and the scales that the magistrates work to.
Thank you, Marcus. A direct question for you, Richard. What is the provisional cost for an awareness course to a local authority or who pays for it?
Well, they do. I mean, they're paying a lot out to go through the CEO work and the investigation work. In terms of costs from ourselves, we are a business, so we need to have conversations with the authority about what it should look like. For example, we don't know if we are dealing with one case from a local authority or hundreds of cases from an authority. However, as part of the process for an awareness course, it is right and proper that you can only recover costs associated with the investigation. So it isn't right that you can actually add a punitive value to that to put people off. It needs to be a transparent cost that they can justify. So there are costs from ourselves for administering the course. That will be apportioned across numbers that could be put through the course. The most of the cost, I would dare say, comes from the local authority getting to that stage. So there isn't a fixed amount, but when it comes down to it, it will be down. My view would be that it needs to be of a value higher that would be a deterrent, so that people know, in Marcus's case, that they commit a misuse of a badge in Nottingham, that they could face a course that could cost them hundreds of pounds. That will stop them doing it again. But the first thing to do is to find out what the costs are associated with it, taking into account our cost for the administration of the scheme, and then putting out there perhaps a fixed value each time, so that you know that if you misuse, in this case perhaps in Nottingham, that you will be facing a course option of X £100 perhaps. It could well be, conversations I've had with primarily local authorities in London, not with Tom's authority, but other authorities. They feel a value of for the course would be around £500 for the course, and that's derived from the cost that they have for investigation, added to our costs. So there's no fixed value. There's obviously no legislation that goes with this. It will be down to council policy to take into account our costs plus what they cost to administrate.
Thank you. We've had a number of very similar questions, and it's actually quite close to my heart. My father, a nuclear engineer, very intelligent man, now 89-ish, and hates his smartphone. Can't use it, can't work it out, gets confused. We've had a number of questions from 3 or 4 people. How not everyone uses a smartphone. How is this going to help them? How is a digital blue badge going to work for them?
Guess that's one for me.
Do you want to take that?
Yes. Okay. I guess if you look at if you go back a few years when applications for paying for parking came out, there are many applications out there. Our Ringo and Pay by Phone and Just Park and others provide an alternative to paying at a machine traditionally. And still today, not everybody wants to use a smartphone to pay for parking. Lots do, and some don't. The way we look at this is we feel that this is the best route to digitise the badge. We know it won't be a silver bullet, and we know there will be what I would say edge cases where it's not appropriate, but we want to start somewhere. And we feel a smartphone with all the accessibility options it has nowadays is a really useful tool for disabled people to have generally in life, but also to operate the badge. Now, if we can get people using the digital blue badge, let's say 60% of the nation using the badge, and that should rise, we will probably fix a higher proportion of the problem of people misusing the badge. If we can get 70% using it, and the 30% that will be left there are people that either don't want to use a smartphone. I'm sure it won't be mandated. If we fix 70% of the problem, we feel that we will also make good headway into clearing out bad spaces that are being misused for legitimate users to use that space. But it's not a silver bullet, and it will take time. It will be a generation thing. Still today, there are people not using apps to pay for parking, and I'm sure it will be the same going forward with the badge. What we are charged to do, what we really want to do, is really make the app so useful for blue badge holders with the other features that we'll introduce that they actually want to use it. And we believe that will drive adoption of it. It will take time. Probably the reason it's not digitized today is because it's quite a task. But we've started it, and we are, I say, deep in conversations with the right people to be able to make sure that this could be something for the future. But no, if somebody can easily quote to me today, perhaps their grandmother doesn't have a smartphone, doesn't trust them. No, they won't, and they can continue using their manual badge, I'm sure. We want to make it so that actually it becomes really useful to them, and it starts to solve the majority of the problem.
Thank you. Perhaps one for Tom and or Marcus. Chris from the IPC, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, Chris. But Chris asked about collaboration across private and public sector car parks. Is there any, Tom, do you have a view on that? How can your officers help? How can we manage?
Sorry, Gavin. Yeah, I was going to say one thing that I do think there is there is a blind spot here, and there is a real challenge with private land and private car park operators. And one of the real challenges is we know from a local authority perspective, the key way you identify misuse of badges is access to the DFT data. And that data is not readily available to private car park owners. When everyone, the way the data works is that if you're a local authority that issues blue badges, you sign up to a data sharing agreement with the DFT to say, I will share all my data with you about who we've issued badges to. You can put that online, and I accept that that data will be shared with every other council in the country for the purposes of law enforcement. That's the data sharing agreement you have. That agreement is done then with every other council, so every council can see whoever's data. where you need to work with a private car park, you need to put in place data sharing agreements. Now, one of the things I'm going to be starting very soon at Ealing is I've just signed up an agreement with a private car park to provide them mediated access to our blue badge data. So where private car parks are going to have their own blue badge bays, they'll have designated officers who will contact the council, say we've got this blue badge on display, and then we'll be able to let them know whether the badge is a valid badge or not valid. That's a process that's taken a lot of engagement with our data protection officers and the DFT to make sure we get it right. But that's the key way that partnership working needs to happen to actually protect the scheme more in the car park. So that's how it needs to be done.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, if I could add on to that one as well, exactly right. As Tom said, our partnerships in the city are based on we patrol with our officers, but we are looking to have a data sharing agreement in place with regards to the officers being able to check the badges themselves. I provide a training to them because, as we know, they have to be authorised officers to be able to inspect and retain a badge where necessary. So they will go through our training, and then they will be on my authorised officer list. And we carry out some days of action with car park operators, and also where we have an officer on patrol with them as well. It's quite surprising how many misuse cases we pick up from the hospitals. It's quite disappointing in some respect. But we have written agreements in place should we need to pursue a case to prosecution, and we use that as evidence, and we have the backing of the landowner, obviously the NHS or the car park operator, to do that work. So it can work. It's just about getting the feet in the door, asking the questions, do you want to get involved? And the vast majority of the time it is.
It would seem that collaboration is sort of the way ahead here, really. Richard, one for you, a couple for you. Around the DFT, have the DFT approved the digital, or sorry, what is the DFT position on the digital blue badge? And have the DFT approved the training course, the awareness course? Sorry.
Not yet. We are working with the British Parking Association to approach the DFT for their view on the digital blue badge. We know from the Welsh Government, they certainly support what we're doing. They won't endorse what we're doing. Obviously, we're a private company, but they fully support what we're doing, and we've got a lot of support from other areas. Hopefully, we have the same from the IPC as well. So we've got to have that conversation with the DFT about it, about the digital blue badge, and we are hoping to get their support on it. In terms of the awareness course, no, the DFT don't need to really approve the awareness course. We will certainly talk to them about it. For those that perhaps do try to engage with the DFT, it can be quite a difficult process to get a meeting with them. So we're sitting patiently a little bit to have that meeting with them. But we have had both, I know Tom has provided support for what the work we're doing to the DFT directly. We know that the BPA have also mentioned us to the DFT in our support, and other people from the European Parking Association have mentioned us and supported our view. I've just not been able to get that meeting myself, Gavin. So as soon as we've had that, we will certainly be letting people know what the situation is. But as of right now, as I mentioned in my presentation, the digital blue badge isn't released yet. And for that reason, we want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row in terms of the support that we've got and the things that we're working on, also with the MPP. And on the awareness course, available now. And if we can get an endorsement or support, or whatever the right term is from the DFT to go with that, we will work on that as well.
Well, thank you. Tristan Mitchell has asked, social media can be highly effective. And I guess this is probably for maybe Tom. I know you love a bit of social media. I know you're engaged in it. What's the most effective social media campaign you've seen? What was one you would want to do? And I do like the comment from Louise, who's put in the webinar chat. Press releases on successful prosecutions, name and shame. How does Ealing feel about that? Marcus, I can see you laughing as well. Is that something you would do?
Yeah,
I'll let you first.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, there was a campaign done by the North Essex Parking Partnership. Forgive me, I've just forgotten the name of all those, but that was a really good game about protecting CEOs. I think that, raising the profile about what misuse does and how it affects people is really important, because a lot of the people, and Marcus will probably say the same, is a lot of the people you find who are misusing badges or using fake or stolen badges, they're not using it to park on double yellow lines, and that doesn't make it less worse, but they're very often using them to park in actual disabled bays. So, they're not only misusing the scheme, but they're then taking away a provision for someone who sorely needs it. And one of the effective campaigns, we're launching at the moment in Ealing is about, people who have a blue badge. They don't want to have a blue badge. They have a blue badge because it's a necessity in life for them, but they don't actually want it. And it's about highlighting the impact of misuse on people, how it really affects them. I think the name and shame is a really positive one. My own experience in local authority is that some councils get very, very nervous and anxious about the publicity about name and shaming. And there's a real misunderstanding that disabled motorists want to see the scheme enforced. It doesn't appear that you're targeting disabled motorists. It appears that you're targeting people who abuse the scheme. So, yeah, that's my views.
Yeah,
Thanks, Tom.
I agree. Recent comments I answered along what Tom said about the nervousness around it. I've been doing social media now for many years, and I've never had any negativity at all from what we post, what we advertise. It's picked up by the local news, and again, the vast majority, bar the daft comments that you do get on certain posts, the vast majority of the comments are very positive for the work that we do, and they want to see more. They ask why their local authority doesn't do similar things. But in some cases, local authorities do the work. They just don't advertise the fact that they are doing the work. So maybe introducing a bit of social media work or doing press releases on occasion does help their case. But I would always do social media. It's the only way to put things out there nowadays. If we're going digital with the badge, then we should be embracing what people are doing, and Facebook, Twitter, or whatever we call it now is the way to go.
I love that. Facebook, Twitter, showing your age, Marcus. Just a very quick one from Claire, or a couple from Claire. I think it's a statement and perhaps a question. If all LAs operate a blue badge system, that are they not obliged to provide other LAs with the blue badge information? And the second part of that is specifically, Marcus, do you have many cases of the person who doesn't engage, turn up for interview, etc.? What happens then? Do you proceed? What's the process?
That's a difficult one. Again, if we do face-to-face interviews, invite them in, yes, there is the potential that they won't turn up, or you end up interviewing the wrong person because they weren't the driver if you've only got the driver details. So we've started doing them by post, and yes, they may not answer. We do pursue we will send questionnaires a few times. We'll do hand-delivered questionnaires. We'll also do recorded delivery. However, we do have that problem. If they don't respond, we can be stuck in some fashion unless we have been able to obtain their full details. If they've been questioned at the roadside, if they've had the vehicle towed away, and we've been able to get their documents when they've visited the pound, then we will always pursue where we can. But yes, that does happen, and our partnership at the minute doesn't allow us to get the police involved, but that is being looked at. But there are ways to do it.
Thank you very much, Richard. Perhaps it was the way I put the question, but many people are still asking what is the cost of the course, and I presume they're sort of asking, if I misuse a blue badge and I'm caught by Marcus and asked to go on a course, how much would it cost me? Is the cost direct to me as the offender? There's a lot of people, and I apologize. I think it's perhaps I didn't ask the question correctly.
No, it's Yeah, I can imagine it being a popular question to ask. So the range that we're looking at the moment with the local authorities that we've spoken to range from £300 paid by the person that's attending the course. They are the highest amount that has been put to me, and again, this is derived from cost for the local authority and for myself, has been £500. So no cost to the authority. We administer the whole process. And you, as a user, Gavin, that's misused the badge, would face either a charge for going on the educational awareness course of, at the moment, £300 or potentially £500, depending on that local authority policy.
Thank you. So I apologise. It's probably me not asking correctly. Another thing that's probably a quick one. Who makes the videos that are watched and give the education back to me as the offender?
So they're from National Blue Badge. We've also have a few partners that provide those videos. We also want to do some more. So I don't know if the guys on the call, but Steve Goodall at Portsmouth, really good guy in terms of raising awareness for prosecutions of blue badges, puts out his own training courses. We're going to talk to Steve about potential videos in future. So at the moment, we have a range of our own videos and those provided by some of our partners, created to give that message across. But they will be an ever-evolving piece of media, if you will. There's part of the video which we've gone down this route because it gives such flexibility, where the presenter of the course is actually an AI generated presenter. What that allows us to do is it allows us to provide the course to be delivered by perhaps a course presenter that the person receiving the course is more comfortable with. So that could be a female, it could be a male, it could be someone older, it could be somebody younger, it could be a choice of presenters that makes them feel more comfortable. It also allows us to change the language that the course is delivered in, and allows us to edit the script. So whilst you are being delivered the course by an AI presenter, it allows the local authority to ensure that script is exactly as it should be and delivered as it should be. And the choice of the person being where the course is delivered to, being delivered to by somebody that they're comfortable of having it delivered to by. So we are embracing AI in that respect, but we believe it gives the person that's receiving the course the right language. Subtitles can be provided as well, and by the person that they're comfortable with.
Thank you. A quick one from Manny. Good to see Manny online again. Manny has pointed out that the maximum fine of £1,000 is similar for repeat fare evasion. And clearly misusing a blue badge is probably worse. Discuss, Marcus, what do you think? I think we've talked about the fine already not being sufficient. Can a local authority influence that at all?
Yeah, I think again that goes to what you're pushing them through on. If you do it under the Fraud Act, I know some local authorities do push for a prosecution under the Fraud Act because they are not paying their way, which is a type of fraud. So that is one option that can be done if that's in relation to evading fares. So yes, there is a way to do it. But agreed, the fines are not enough. And that also corresponds with the penalty charge notices that are issued for the contravention that the misuser has done. There needs to be an increase in those as well, and an improved way of issuing a penalty charge notice for blue badge misuse, and not just using the contraventions that are available now. They also need reviewing.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because Zach Atkins says, apologises for being late. Next time, Zach, please be on time. But he asks, should there be a PCN code for misuse?
Totally
Tom,
agree.
Tom, Marcus, how easy is that?
Well, if someone misuses a badge, there's two things. There's the unpaid parking, which is what the PCN deals with, the civil debt. And then there's the criminal side of the offence, which is, whether you take it to court or, prosecute or not. So there's two sides to it. So, I always think it's good evidentially if you issued a PCN to a vehicle with a blue badge that you suspect is being misused or something. If the PCN then gets paid, I think that gives you good evidence that they know they are in the wrong. I think one of the interesting things, and again, something I think we should be lobbying with the DFT is, there are other disposal methods that you aren't permitted in law to use, but are in existence, such as fixed penalty notices. So if you commit an offence of littering or fly tipping, you can get up to a £5,000 fine and a fixed penalty notice. A fixed penalty notice is basically a fine where we say you will accept this fine in lieu of being prosecuted. There are other tools out there which exist, that aren't actually available, because when this legislation was made, I doubt people envisaged how badly the scheme would be abused in the future.
Just a little,
Thank you.
as
Right.
Tom said there, with the penalty charge being used as evidence, it's brilliant. And all local authorities have should have CEOs, parking attendants issuing those penalties. And again, that comes back to what can we do just to start the ball rolling with badge enforcement of misuse and abuse. You could start by having that communication, having that teamwork with the penalty charge, noticing, processing teams, whatever we call them. You can use those photos from the penalty charges as evidence. As Tom said, if they pay it, they've accepted liability and that contravention did occur. And we use that in our statements and in our case summaries. So the penalty charge does play an important part, and everything could start from that if changes were made.
Cool. Perhaps one for you, Richard. Scott Redfern asks, and it's a really good question, because my daughter regularly breaks into my phone with her, I don't know how she does it, with her biometric data. He says you can have multiple individual biometric data on smartphones to unlock, make purchases, etc. How will the digital blue badge overcome this?
I can't say that it will. If there are people with multiple access to their phone, then it could potentially be breached. I feel that we might be talking about a small number. The crucial thing is that smartphone has to be with the badge at the same time. And we would encourage people to keep their badge on them and use the digital badge going forward. We also see an evolution that potentially the badge could replace the current manual badge. That's a conversation that we need to have with the DFT about how that could work. Well, that's probably years and years ahead. So it does rely on the biometrics that go with the phone. And once you've gone through the biometrics on the phone, it will tag you to that location and allow you to then start your parking. If you do have multiple people on your phone and you want to then allow them to take your phone, perhaps the example is your daughter's on your phone and you want to let her use your blue badge. So you give her your smartphone to go and park in a location. You've lost your smartphone for that period. Some people have them, attached to their side, So your daughter takes your smartphone to the shops, locks them into that location, takes your badge at the same time to get the free parking. There is a method to perhaps try and get over it, but people that want to do that, perhaps it won't suit them on day one, and we'll look to try and improve on that. But we feel in the vast majority of cases, it will roll out that ease of passing the badge around. But I've got no doubt that there will be people out there thinking how I can get around this scheme, and we'll work very hard to try and not let them get around that scheme.
I think there's been an industry of people trying to get around every scheme.
Well, it's human nature, I think, Gavin.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. A quick one. What do Tom and Marcus? What do you feel about lifetime blue badges? Because I believe at the moment they're renewed every year. Is that right? But there are some people that have, lifetime illnesses or end of life illnesses. What's the local authority view on issuing a blue badge for life?
I'll let you go.
Yes, it's a difficult one for me because I've never really thought about that one. There is a good few European countries that still issue some lifetime badges, and we know how challenging they can be for enforcement purposes. But I think if there is going to be something like that considered, there needs to be vigorous background checks done, and other systems talking into the blue badge scheme systems, such as Tellers Once, DWP to ensure that badges are cancelled in the future when they need to be. But I think it would make it would provide some challenges, particularly on updating photographs, for example. So if there is a need for photographs, if we go digital as well. But yeah, it's certainly an option, but it's never really been spoken about unless others know more than that.
I would be in favour of it. You know, and like Marcus says, you know, it is challenging as people change over time. You know, making sure the photo is accurate. At the moment, the longest badges can be issued for is 3 years, and then they get automatically renewed. But badges can be issued for shorter periods as well. So, you know, even an example of if someone had, you know, surgery on their knee and they were going to be, you know, really restricted mobility wise for 6 months, you know, they can legitimately apply to the council and try and obtain a blue badge under discretionary criteria for a 6-month period. And there's no issue with that. From a personal level, my elder brother Joe has a blue badge. He's autistic. He's got fibrosis in his legs. He's got no capacity and you know, very limited mobility, and that's a lifelong limiting condition. And I have to renew his badge every 3 years for him. And I do always think to myself, well, you know, there is a note on the system to say, you know, Joseph does not require further assessment, but it would seem from a council process perspective easier for us to have a system where it's just automatically renewed, you know, as opposed to having to, you know, do all that work. And that would be a better end user experience as well, I think, for disabled people or carers, just removing that one little task that they have.
So thank you for that. So a couple of slightly broader ones, and we've got just under 10 minutes left. Does the blue badge eligibility criteria need to be more stringent as you go through it, Tom, every 3 years? What do you think?
I think it's very challenging. I think the biggest inconsistency with blue badge criteria is what's called is the discretionary criteria. So there's set criteria about people who receive personal independent payments. I think some people get disability living allowance, you know, and there's set criteria on distances people can walk and things like that. So there are criteria in place, and you know, I think they are, you know, they are good as a starting point. I think the 2019 change, including hidden disabilities, is what has increased the number of people who are eligible. And I think, you know, it's very valid. I think it has created a challenge because I don't think it was expected to become that large. But I think the real frustration with it is that discretionary criteria by its nature is discretionary. So a council in Essex might give a badge for someone with this set criteria, then, you know, just over the Thames, few hundred metres away in Kent, you know, they might not. And that's where the frustration comes with people, as they don't understand. And that all comes down to that discretionary criteria, which does create problems.
Thank you. Richard, Gallagher asks, how do you ensure engagement if you're using an AI presenter?
It's not delivered in person. So yes, it is delivered by an AI presenter that will ask the questions. We'll also go through the script, so the impact on the person. It's designed for people to view. And then the questions are asked at the end of each section. So they are primarily watching a video that's delivered by a presenter at the start. And then a question comes about the video and they're given a multiple choice selection of answers. So they need to watch the video. So they need to be engaged with that video. They need to be able to answer that question. What we do is we structure it so we leave it to the local authority to decide if there is, let's call it a pass rate. So you can go through the whole course, and if you get 80% right, perhaps you pass the course. It's a real mixed bag on the policy, if you like, because some authorities would like them not to go to the next question until they've got the question right. And that's entirely up to them. So it's an educational piece along the way, but the engagement, the AI presenter is really there at the start and creates the merge from one section to the next. but they really are answering questions based on the video content and the questions that are on the screen. And the questions that are on the screen relate to the videos, but they also come out of the Blue Badge scheme itself that's published as a booklet to every Blue Badge holder to really remind them of what it's there for. So there's no real interaction, if you will. There's no conversation, if you like, with the AI presenter. They're just there really to present the videos and the questions that come along.
Thank you. Perhaps a very broad one. We've got time for a couple more. Do we know what percentage roughly go to court in the UK? Do we know what one case is? I mean, I can see Marcus and Tom going, "God, how would we know that?" Any rough idea?
I would imagine out of all the offences committed across the UK, I would imagine that less than 0.00001% ever end up being investigated or prosecuted. And the reason I say that is because the last data that the DFT produced in 2019 or 2020 for local authorities, which went ahead and did prosecute offenders, it showed that over 65% of all the prosecutions came from, I think, 9 different councils in the whole of the UK. So, there's a real massive issue there. Something Marcus mentioned earlier about the challenges around if people don't reply to letters. One of the big challenges is there's a disparity of powers. There are powers available to councils in London that councils outside of London don't have. So this again is one of the things why I say we need to work together as an industry and local authorities to campaign to the DFT to create and provide broader powers, particularly to councils outside of London, to tackle the problem.
Well, I'm just going to, like the end of University Challenge, I'm going to speed up a little bit. Joanna asks, can you see the potential of using the Blue Badge awareness course as part of the CEO back office training? Marcus, you talked about training earlier. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, that's something that could be included on that if local authorities take that on board. And I know there are current conversations in place at the minute with British Parking Association developing some sort of training plan through that. They do regular meetings with that people can jump on. There are all the local authorities that provide training to others. Particularly for the CEOs, my aim has always been to use what you have. So my training for the CEOs can be provided to other local authorities just to give them an idea.
Okay, great.
Gavin,
well,
can I just mention on that one, Gavin,
sorry,
as well? One of the advantages of having a smartphone application, and what I haven't spoke about today, is there is an enforcement side of this app for the CEOs to be able to check the badges. And that is going to be free to all local authorities that want to use it, which allows you to manually check the badge as well as see the digital badges that are in use. But as part of that, we are going to put on a training tab that will provide 10-second, 30-second training modules, if you will, on CEO training for Blue Badge enforcement. So if you need to understand how to recite what you need to say before you seize a badge, you'll be able to go onto the app, click that piece of training. Perhaps you do it around the corner before you go and approach somebody, so you're very much aware of what you need to say. So it's dynamic, because training courses, they're really good and get a really good, what Marcus spoke about, it's really good for CEOs to have that, but sometimes you just need a little reminder and you need it there all the time. So as part of our package, where the CEOs will get a training package of a growing number of videos that allow them to do their job as efficiently and as effectively as they can.
Right. I'm conscious of the time. I just kind of want to end up with a couple of statements that have been put on here. And certainly this debate should be ongoing. So something for Marcus, Tom, and Richard to think about. But John Carr asks that there may be some kind of match up between those that issued a bus pass. I'm coming close to getting mine soon, and the Blue Badge scheme. Maybe there's some correlation there. And Manny has very kindly put on here, just to let the panel and the audience know that EU is currently developing a digital parking card, brackets Blue Badge equivalent, to be used across all EU member nations and affiliated countries. Potentially DFT, so he keeps moving it, DFT will engage with this and examine the future implications for the UK. So thank you, Manny. Always very useful to have your European knowledge. I'm going to wrap it up here. I've managed to get through most of them, although questions are still coming in. I think what it does demonstrate very clearly is the need for this conversation to happen. Those online, and we've consistently stayed at the same level most of this conversation, which is great news. If you want to contact Landor Links, we can put you in touch with Richard, Tom, and Marcus, who I'm sure would be delighted to carry on the conversation with you publicly or privately. Yeah, you can see Richard's contact details at the bottom, but failing that, please contact Landor, Jason Conboy, Mark Moran, or Gavin Manger, myself. We can connect you all. It's what we do. It's what we do well. So thank you all very much for joining, and special thanks to Richard, Tom, and Marcus. I look forward to keep following you, Marcus, and seeing you out on the street, getting the baddies and being abused and shouted at. It's always quite funny at times, but clearly doing a great job. And Richard, thank you for letting us know about what you're up to. Tom, look forward to seeing you soon, mate. Thank you very much, everybody. Catch up later.